Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Game Over Ottawa. Maude here once again, and we've got a new host joining us for the first time today. Nick, how are you doing?
Doing okay. If you asked me about the midway point of the Senators game that we're going to react to today, I probably would have a different answer for you, but I feel a lot better now. Happy to be here and going to be a heck of a first game to cover.
Yeah, you pretty much hit the jackpot in terms of things to talk about, especially because like you said about halfway through this game, it seemed like there wasn't going to be much positives, but we end up somehow with a win, 8-7 in overtime over the Los Angeles Kings. And when we get a win on this show, we like to do a little thing called the sensed button. Gonna hit that right now for our little victory jingle. There it is, because the Los Angeles Kings have been sensed by the Ottawa Senators here today. In DJ Smith's return to the nation's capital, it probably didn't go the way he planned it, probably didn't go the way that Travis Green planned it for the Senators either, but that's where we are with an 8-7 victory. So lots to talk about today. But yeah, since this is your first show, Nick, do you want to maybe introduce yourself a little more?
Yeah, for sure. Well, like everybody here working for Game Over Ottawa, just I've been, massive Senators fan. Watched the Senators for I think I was counting the other day, year 17 for me now, watching this team. Been watching since '07. And like many others, just absolutely dying for some success here. I think one thing you'll probably get to know about me pretty quick and watching me is I'm a big Steos fan, big fan of some of the new moves they're making. I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more here as we go on.
For sure, yeah. 2007 is right around where I would say most people our age is when they really became a fan. And this game almost felt like a throwback to that era, didn't it?
Yeah.
With the 8 goals, it was feeling a little bit like when the pizza line was just running amok out there, eh?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it felt like, right? The Senators really haven't had a free scoring team since that. I don't know if this team, this iteration, 24-25, is going to be free scoring like that, but definitely flex the offensive muscles today.
Hmm. So we're gonna get into all that and more. The offense, the defense, the goaltending. I figure it was such a crazy game, the type of game where I start taking notes at the beginning, and I think Nick told me he did too. And then by the time it got to like 4-4, I was like, okay, I can't even keep up with trying to like analyze all the individual moments in this game. It's one of those games where there were so many goals that went in that you kind of almost start to forget all of them. It was 15 goals in total in the end. So lots to talk about here today. We'll try to get through it all. But before we get into our first major segment, just want to give a shout out to the main Game Over Network channel where we have our new flagship show, Hyperdrive Hockey. Great team running that show with Max, Daphne, and Kevin. They're bringing you sort of the major stories from around the whole NHL every Tuesday and Friday, I believe it is. So they'll have a new episode coming up tomorrow. If you're not already subscribed to the Game Over Network channel, be sure to check that out. But now I figure we might as well just throw it into the second period segment here, which I do not have the cool buzzer sound effect that Charlie has. Still need to get that set up, but on to segment two, because I figure right away we just have to get into the defense and goaltending. What the hell happened tonight, Nick?
Yeah, it was such a strange one because you come away from that really thinking, they got scored on 7 times. It's terrible. You never like 8 goals, 7 goals that the Senators scored in regulation should be more than enough to win you a hockey game every single night. But it was one of those things. I felt like for a lot of that game at 5v5, they actually played pretty okay, especially considering they lost Artem Zub pretty early into that first period. And we're only running 5 defensemen for the majority of that game. But I felt like they actually played and defended okay for long stretches at 5v5, but just couldn't buy a save all game and felt really reminiscent of a lot of games last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it was 4-2 or 3-1, I was basically thinking this is exactly like last year, where those quick goals, 2 quick goals by LA in the first period. I think they were within a minute, and I think it was quick goals to go from 3-1 to 4-1 as well. Or it was like the Kings responded right after we scored. It's this thing with the Sens lately where they just can't seem to keep momentum. either one bad thing happens to them and it spirals, or they get one good thing like a goal and then the other team comes right back right away. So we saw a lot of that today, but at least the difference that makes it feel different from last year was just the fact that we kept scoring, really. Like last year I feel like this is a game that we lose like 6-2. When it was 4-2, it was like, okay, nothing's happening here, and then all of a sudden we were able to bring something back and make it into a crazy one. So yeah, the fact that it was about, I think when the Kings tied it 7-7, I believe it was 7 goals on 21 shots, which is 1/3 of the shots going in, and that is just not possible to win in the NHL pretty much. Like 99% chance you will lose. So the fact that we won is just amazing. And like we'll get into the offense a little bit later, which is obviously what won us this game. But yeah, like you said, the 5-on-5 play I feel like was actually some of our best so far this season. Like since the first period against the Florida Panthers, which is basically our only good period out of 6 periods in the first 2 games. Very good 5-on-5 play. It was really the penalty kill that sunk us, eh?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I would definitely say the penalty kill was definitely a little suspect. I'd say, it's you did mention it there that it felt like the type of game that they really would have lost last year. I think you can say that about both wins they've had this year against Florida and today.
Mm-hmm.
Both seem like the type of games, for different reasons, obviously, that they would have lost last year. At times over the last few years under this, new core, it feels like when things just really don't go their way in a game, you can see the drop in confidence. But I don't know whether to attribute it to just, the growth of some of these players overall, or perhaps, this is what Steve Stais had in mind when he went out and got, guys like Perron, Jensen that have, been around the block now a few times to try and sort of keep the spirits up for those players. And you saw a really impressive amount of fight back that, that they didn't often have in a lot of games last year. The penalty kill, obviously not good, not even close to good enough. It wasn't very good in the Montreal game either. The one thing that really jumped out for me, though, I'd say in all 3 games so far, we're noticing a trend where the Senators start really strong. They come out playing really well, really hard on the forecheck, but today and on Saturday, it was an early penalty in the first period that sort of really changed things for them quickly. And you saw this tide turn in that first period when LA got that first power play and they scored 2 goals in 50 seconds after. It sort of just flips the switch. So you see those old habits really, really popping up and just the confidence levels drop off. But, as I said, it's really good that they showed that fight back today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, coming out of this game, it's definitely got to be the penalty kill that Travis Green looks the most at. I feel like on a couple of those goals where the Kings were sort of passing around the perimeter and then got that one-timer in the middle, I feel like our defenders were just kind of collapsing into the slot area and not necessarily covering those passing lanes at all. So I feel like it was just a little too passive from the penalty killers tonight, and I get that you don't want to just totally change your strategy as soon as it starts failing, but man, every time we took another penalty I was like, oh god, it's just going to be another instant goal. So that was really tough to watch tonight.
Yeah, I'd say, the first Fiala goal was the one-timer that was like a pretty well executed play from the Kings. And obviously a team with the offensive talent like the Kings, like you're gonna have to work pretty hard to keep them off the board on the power play the whole game. But I would say it was the second Fiala goal in the second period where he sort of just walked in to the circle, had all sorts of time to load up a shot and, pick the top corner. A talented shooter like Kevin Fiala, like that's just what, like you said, it's just you can't really drop off on a player like that. There's not a lot of teams who have first units that you can sort of just drop off on like that. I felt that was really the only one for me that I was like, okay, give me a break. Like it was a really disappointing way to get scored on the power play. So I think, they're going to have to drill it down because Montreal did quite a number on them on the power play as well on Saturday. And it's definitely looking like a weak point of this team so far. Again, it's a really small sample size, 3 games, but, like we look for trends, how they start games well. You look for trends early on here and just it doesn't, the penalty kill's not too encouraging right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned the two Fiala power play goals. If I remember correctly, they were both scored on Anton Forsberg, right? It was like the first goal
Right.
and the third goal. Just to get into the goaltending a little bit, because we didn't see Anton Forsberg for too long today. I think he was gone before the halfway point of the game, or right around the halfway point. Um, just on those two Fiala goals specifically, I feel like they were solid setups by the Kings power play, but even though the penalty kill was backing off by the Sens, I kind of feel like you would like a save on at least one of those, especially the first one, the short side one timer. I feel like when I saw that go in, I was like, Ullmark makes that save, right? Like it's not just me thinking that it would have been totally different with Ullmark in net today.
Yeah, again, it's right. We can complain about the defense and the not so great penalty killing at times throughout the game. We can sit here and harp on that, but at the end of the day, you just really need saves sometimes. And they just really didn't get any today. Aside from, I think Sogard made one in the last minute of the game that was like pretty decent. I don't recall them getting a big save at any point in this game, even though Saturday's loss was pretty ugly for a different variety of reasons in Montreal. Olmark came up with the goods a couple of times, but in this game, they just couldn't buy one. Again, I already said it, 7 goals in regulation in any game should be way more than enough to win you a game in the National Hockey League, especially on home ice. But they just couldn't get it tonight. And again, it's going to come back. There was the news this morning that Olmark was being held out and things like that. Everybody's going to hold their breath until Thursday now to see what updates come out of that. But it's pretty evident that any sort of longer term injury to Olmark at this point would it's a little discouraging to see that this is what would potentially await us in that situation again. So gonna have to cross our fingers and hope for the best, I suppose.
Definitely. Like it's a small sample size, only one game here with the second and third string goaltenders, but it does have me thinking already like, oh, is backup goalie going to be a problem position this year? And I feel bad for Anton Forsberg because he's a great guy, and the way we brought him into Ottawa, plucked him off of waivers and gave him a huge opportunity. Part of that was Matt Murray always being injured, and then it was like, okay, I guess Forsberg has to play. But he really took that opportunity and ran with it, and he earned the contract that he got with the Senators. But it's just kind of feeling like ever since that injury, I think it was 2 seasons ago when Zach Hyman fell on him and he had to have, I think it was like double knee surgery or something. It just feels like he hasn't been the same goalie. And the obvious setup here with the contracts is that Forsberg's contract is expiring at the end of this year, and then Sogard is going up to a one-way contract. So they're obviously positioning it for Sogard to take over as the backup next season. But then you watch this game and you're like, oh, is he even ready for that? I'm not really sure. So like we talked about the goals that Forsberg let in, but what do you think about Sogard really? Do you think this guy has NHL potential at this point?
I'm getting a little nervous on Sogard.
Me too.
If you asked me a couple of years ago, I would have said for sure afford him all the time you can. But I think we're getting to a real breaking point, I'd say, on Sogard, which is a crazy thing to say considering some of the goalies that have left the organization in the past few years, whether that's Gustafson or Decord, guys that have gone on to earn pretty decent contracts in other organizations and get a lot of games. But at the end of the day, at this point, I think the difference between them and Sogard is, Sogard is only 23, but this is now I looked at it mid-game because I was, pissed off like everybody else at some of the easy the Laferriere goal was the one that really did it for me. Again, it was a
Yeah.
like crafty play by him to work himself into a shooting spot, but it just you can't get beat on that. Sogard has now played. This is the fourth different NHL season he's gotten a game in. And at really no point has he had a stretch of games that has really given me a lot of confidence. I don't know if that's different for you, but I can't recall like a stretch of 2 or 3 games where he really stood on his head and was winning them games. Obviously, a couple years ago, right after that Forsberg injury, and Talbot was hurt at that point when they were going out west that year later on, trying to keep their playoff hopes alive. I went out west to watch the 4 games in Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton that year, and he played in 3 of those games. Again, it was a horrible position for a really young goaltender to be thrusted into at that point, and I don't entirely fault him for what transpired on that trip, which was 3 really terrible losses in 4 games. But we fast forward now to almost 2 years later, and there's not been an awful lot of improvement, at least in the NHL level. He's got decent numbers in the AHL, but at some point you really need it to start to translate to this level, and it just, for whatever reason, doesn't look like it's coming together for him.
Yeah, I totally agree that the worrying part is that it doesn't seem like he's actually progressing at the NHL level. Like you said, good AHL stats, but 2 years ago when he had to play like 20 games after Forsberg was injured, back then I remember thinking, well, he doesn't look great, but he's probably he we weren't intending to play him this many games, so it's not really his fault. And then last year, I think he only played a few games and he had like a horrendous 859 save percentage. And again, I was like, okay, the defense is just a mess this year. Like it's a mulligan, you know? Like his stats should be better than that. It's not really his fault. But then you see a game like today where we dominated at 5v5 and the Corsi and everything is way in the Senators' favor from this game, and you just couldn't get a save from Sogard regardless. So yeah, like I'm starting to get worried. I don't know if he's gonna remain like the long-term backup, like successor to Anton Forsberg at this point. It's getting scary.
Yeah, he's gotta, especially for his own sake, he's gotta step it up at some point because the Senators have other goaltending prospects in the system, like a Levi Meriläinen or somebody like that, that are, gonna eventually make their own case to be the next guy up when there's a goaltending injury. And if Sogard continues to sort of play like this when he's in the NHL, he's eventually gonna run out of, that leeway. I think one thing that we've seen in Steve Staios's, almost a year as GM, I think he's a bit more aggressive on the decision making than perhaps his predecessors. He's a little easier to I'd say he probably cuts bait a little quicker than Pierre Dorion did at some point. So I think for Matt Sogard's own sake, he's got to put together a good stretch of games here when he gets the opportunity to. Otherwise, I can't see him sticking around or being the goalie of the future for this team. If that's what it's going to be like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the tough thing for me too is that he's so big. He's like 6'7" or like 6'8" on skates, however many inches the skate blades add, and it just feels like pucks go right through him on some of these goals. Like you mentioned, the Laferriere goal, I think was the sixth one, where it's just like he comes out to challenge the shooter, and it looks like he's perfectly in position, and you're like, the guy must have nothing to shoot at because Sogard is so big in the net, right? And somehow it gets in anyway. So like I don't know what it is about his play style at the NHL level. Maybe he's just not as confident and not doing as good of a job as making himself big in the net as he should be, which is funny to say because he is so big. It feels like it shouldn't take any effort to do that.
Well, yeah, that's usually what the track record is on the big goalies, right? It's like, and why so many teams like to draft big goalies is that even if they're not always in the right position, I think the sort of theory always is that the puck's just going to hit them more because they're big. And for whatever reason, there's way too many goals, like you point out, like the Laferriere goal, where he just gets cleanly beat, and you're sort of sitting there watching the replay, wondering how. Again, a shot from that far out. Credit to LaFerriere, he stole it off of Pinto. There were a whole circus of issues from Ottawa that led up to that goal, led up to that chance in general. But just can't get a puck blown by you when you're a 6'7" goaltender and you've got time to get out to the paint and challenge the shot. So it's disappointing, but luckily in this case, it won't always be the case. But luckily today, his team was able to save him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll get into that soon. Soon we'll get into the fun stuff with all of the offense. But before we move on to that, I do just want to give one more note on the defense and goaltending. Was that I want to give a huge shout out to Tyler Kleven tonight, because in the first couple of games and in most of the preseason, I hadn't been too impressed with him, and I was kind of feeling like, well, they're just kind of handing the roster spot to this rookie because there's no one to challenge him apart from him really instead of him like really pressing for that spot and taking it himself. But I thought he was fantastic tonight. He was much better with the puck on his stick. I think one time he even drew a tripping penalty because he managed to stick handle away from the forechecker and cause him to take a penalty. And I think after Zub went down as well, Kleven played a bit on the right side, which is impressive. And I don't know, that flexibility might be nice considering if Zub is going to be out for a while, maybe we might have to put someone else in on the right side. Otherwise, you're ending up with JBD and Hamonic both in the lineup at at once, which could get a little bit sketchy. But do you agree about Tyler Kleven tonight? I felt like he was a bit of a like unsung hero in a game that was 8-7. If I can give any credit to a defenseman, it would definitely be Kleven, I think.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it feels weird to say it in a game that they gave up so many goals, but I'd say there were like quite a few defensemen that, really stepped up, especially after Zub went down. I'd say, like you've pointed out for all the reasons, Clevin was really good. I like the fact that he went his mobility was a lot more on display in this game than it was the first couple. I was really personally impressed with Thomas Chabot throughout a bunch of that game. Um, you know, he always has his defensive issues. I'm not going to sit here and always pretend that Thomas Chabot is like the perfect defensive defenseman or anything like that, but I felt that he had a really good game in terms of play driving, scored a great goal. So I thought he stepped up big time, and it was nice to see, players like Chabot and Clevin step up, and it didn't just have to be the Jake Sanderson show, like it so often feels like it is. Despite the fact that he also had a solid game, scored a goal as well. So it was good to see some others step up. But definitely, if Zub is out for any period of time, this is sort of one of the things that I think every Senators fan has had in the back of their mind throughout the preseason, throughout the first couple games of this season. There's sort of one big injury on defense away from catastrophe. I'm not at all sold on a right side of, where JBD or Hamannik are going to play top 4 minutes. So if Cleven has that mobility, can play a bit more on the right side, you can shelter a six defenseman, shelter Hamannik a bit more, and then, JBD doesn't have to play as much, and you can really play them third pairing minutes. That would be great. But well, yeah, if Zub is out any period of time, I think it's going to show a bit because they really need another quality NHL body back there, I feel like.
Yeah, you're 100% right about all of that. And I totally agree about Thomas Chabot too. Like, it's very up and down with his defensive game, but we really got to see his elite offensive talent just all over the ice tonight. I think he ended up with a goal and an assist. I don't remember the exact stats. With how many goals were scored, it's hard to keep track of who had how many points. But I just wonder, the whole thing with Chabot has been his defense partner and never having the right guy next to him. And I wonder, like, it was rotating today because of the 5D, but ideally he's mostly with Nick Jensen, and I feel like Jensen could be, regardless of how well he does individually, he could be the guy who is sort of the Mathot to Chabot's Carlson, and just letting Chabot go jump up in the play and make those great offensive plays, because I feel like in the last couple of seasons we haven't been seeing that as much from Chabot. I feel like he's been a bit more conservative because he doesn't exactly have that super defensive partner with him, right?
Yeah, I felt, especially under DJ Smith, I felt Shabbat sort of regressed every year, and he just wasn't the player that he looked like he was earlier in his career. And I think just considerably, in my opinion at least, got worse under DJ Smith. And then I felt after the coaching change last year, there was a big jump in his play, and I felt he was a lot better. 3 games into this year, he's had two really strong games. He played very, very well against Florida, did not get any credit for how well he played in that game. Played very well, in my opinion, tonight. He had an inexcusably rough game in Montreal where him and Jensen got absolutely lit up by the Habs top lines and they were feasted on all night. But again, Thomas Chabot is not the perfect defenseman by any means, but he's one of those players, if you use him correctly, he's shown time and time again that he is very dependable and, brings something, for as good as I think Jake Sanderson is, I think Thomas Chabot is a step up from Jake Sanderson offensively. He just makes plays with the puck and shoots and passes just a little bit better than Jake Sanderson. I like Jake Sanderson's quick movement on the power play, looks a bit better this year, but I'd say at 5v5, Thomas Chabot's definitely the better offensive guy. So if Jensen can be that fit, which it has looked like in 2 out of 3 games he can, I'm hoping we can see more of this from Chabot because the Senators are just a different hockey team when Thomas Chabot is playing well.
For sure, you're 100% right about that, and I would say that probably about does it for the defense and goaltending side of things. To end that on a bit more of a positive note, I like what you said about just the offense from both Chabot and Sanderson. I feel like the puck moving ability was just on point tonight. Obviously, there were some turnovers, like the Leferrier goal and stuff like that, but we can try to pick out the positives since it was a Senators win. So in the end, even though that wasn't the defensive performance you would like to see from your team, there were some things that we can look at and say, hey, that's a good sign moving forward. And yeah, speaking of moving forward, before we get into our next segment, gonna get into all the forwards and the offense. Just want to shout out that the Game Over Network is now relying on crowdfunding, as we are now independent, spread across different channels as opposed to a larger channel before hosting all of the shows. So if you do enjoy the content that we put out, we do have a Patreon, multiple tiers there that you can just chip in whatever you like. Reward tiers, different rewards on each. Sorry, I'm stumbling through this. We need to get we need to write out the ad reads before we do them. But Patreon, all your support is appreciated there. And we also have a La Ruche campaign, which is sort of like a GoFundMe based in Quebec thing too, that should be starting next month. So keep an eye out for that too. But yeah, let's throw it to the more positive stuff from this game, which was the offense for our third period here, the third segment of the day. And where do we start? Should we start with Zach McEwen with those 2 goals that nobody saw coming?
Yeah, a bit of a I don't know if you call it vintage Zach McEwen performance because that's not at all his forte at all, but really strong game from Zach McEwen. The slap shot goal was crazy. Like
Ridiculous.
that was insane. I don't think I've ever seen just a forward take the puck, a loose puck come to him, just wind up from there. I'm literally watching him. First thing that goes to your head, I'm sure, same thing for you and me, you're thinking, why the hell is he winding up from there? And then he just blew it over the shoulder of Kemper. That was something. I think though my favorite play he made in that whole game was the massive hit he had on Quinton Byfield with like three
Yes.
minutes left in that game. And you saw that got the crowd up, like all the fans along the boards on that side stood right up, pounding the glass. Like that was a great performance from Zach McEwen. Really good performance. I was looking at the stats here from the fourth line overall, in terms of just your chances for, chances against, like him, Gaudette, and Nick Cousins were all like really strong tonight. So that was really good to see from a group of players that had quite a few fans worried in the preseason first couple games of this one, but showing what they can do that game. If they can bring that type of energy, I'm not expecting Zach McEwen to rattle off 2 goals every game, but if that's the type of energy that they can bring on a nightly basis, then it's going to ultimately make the team a lot better for it.
Now that I look at the box score, I'm surprised that Zach McEwen only played 5 minutes tonight because he was everywhere. He was all over it. I thought it was going to be a little closer to like 9 or 10 minutes overall for the fourth line, just because they were so impactful. And obviously, a fourth line can't consistently be that impactful on the score sheet with the 2 goals from McEwen. But like you said, just bringing that consistent physical play, like that hit on Byfield, was just awesome. And he also got in a fight for standing up for Zub after Zub got ran at the beginning of the game. Can't remember which Kings player that was, but just great stuff from Zach McEwen tonight. And he wasn't my first option to like make the team among the 13th forwards. And I think a lot of people felt that way too. I think a lot of people preferred Ostapchuk or Yannick instead. And you could kind of say the same about Adam Gaudette, but hey, he picked up a huge assist in this game too. That pass to McEwen on his second goal was really sweet.
Nice.
That's the type of thing that you need from Adam Gaudette, because he's kind of that skilled player who isn't quite talented enough for the top 6. And then when he gets placed in the bottom 6, I'm kind of like, well, he doesn't bring the physical play. But at least if he can chip in some offense every now and then, like he did today, you got to give full credit to him too. So that was great stuff. The depth scoring for the Sens was really nice to see, because I feel like through the last couple seasons, basically of doing Game Over, since I started doing it, it's like it's felt like the Sens have been a one-line team, with just Kachuk, Giroux, and Stutzla. A lot of that has been Norris being injured all the time, but we've gone through so many fourth lines that just haven't been good. So the fact that they were able to do something here today was really nice. And also shout out to Mark Kastelic again, because he had 3 points for the Boston Bruins today. I don't know what the hell is going on with that, but it seems like fourth liners come to Ottawa and they suck, and then they leave, and then suddenly they're good somewhere else. But yeah, the depth scoring was really nice to see. With a game where you score 8 goals, I guess you're going to get some depth scoring, but that's something that this team hasn't really gotten over the last couple of years, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's like I said, you need the contributions from other parts of this lineup. That's why I was a big fan of bringing in, guys like Amadio and Perron just to push other players further down the lineup and, give them a different look in some areas. Um, I've really liked Nick Cousins through 3 games. I think he brings that sort of just relentless energy. Drew a fantastic penalty. I think it was for the first goal where he just, I suckered one of the Kings into punching him in the face. Like this is
Yeah.
exactly what you need from your depth players. Just even if they're not going to, I'm not expecting them, like I said, to score goals like this every night. But if they can do things like that, just get your good play, get power play opportunities for your best players. That's exactly what this team needs. Um, it looks like, especially in the bottom six as well, it looks like they're trying to eventually build the shutdown line with Perron, Pinto. Um, why
And
am I
Amadio.
blanking on the yeah, Amadio, sorry. I was blanking on the third person on that line for some reason. But I'm liking the sort of theory there from Travis Green that this is like something that the Senators want. I'm a big fan of having a shutdown line. And if they can eventually just gear this lineup to work around that and hard match that line against top players, sort of like they were doing today. Pinto saw a lot of Kopitar in this game at 5v5. I think they're going to be a lot better for it. Again, it's hard to talk about these things in such a small sample of games, and I'm sure we'll notice a bit more trends, 10, 15 games in, but sort of, a lot of the things people weren't super excited by the hire of Travis Green. A lot of other people weren't super excited by the additions made in the offseason, but you can sort of see evident in these first couple of games what they're trying to do, especially with that bottom six. And I have to say, I do like it so far, some of what they're trying to build up.
Yeah, I was actually meaning to ask you what you thought of that third line with Pinto, Perron, Amadio, because I felt like through the first 2 games, I really wasn't noticing them too much in terms of at least creating offense. But today, I felt like they were really strong on the forecheck and actually created some really good chances, especially in that third period there. And I think it might have been on the power play, but you had Perron driving the net on that Giroux goal that did get reviewed. Luckily, luckily it was not goalie interference, but I think that was the first time that I really noticed Perron in these first few games. So like I feel like you're right that that third line with the shutdown role is a good idea. I think they're kind of warming up to it. This obviously wasn't a shutdown style game at all, so I can't necessarily say that it worked today. But I think you're right that it's a good idea in theory, and they should probably stick with that combination. Eh?
Yeah, it looks like they're building some decent chemistry at least. I thought this was Perron's best game of the three by far.
Definitely.
Um, and I think, like I said, 10, 15 games in, I think we'll have a better idea of what this trio can offer. But they all seem pretty, we've seen it from all three of them now in 3 games, bit willingness to jump up in the attack and get on the forecheck, but also, not this game for sure, but good defensive instincts, which is something the team's really lacked at times. So I think I think I like the looks of it so far, and they're gonna have off nights like tonight, but we'll see what they can bring Thursday against New Jersey.
Yeah, the one thing that I'm wondering about is just the fact that we have Noah Gregor on the second line at the moment at even strength, and I do wonder if maybe like that's obviously because Ridley Gregg wasn't playing today. He's the fill-in for that spot, but I do wonder if you could try like David Perron up in the top six. I'd be curious to see him with some more offensively skilled line mates, like have him with Norris and Batherson. I think maybe we might start to notice him a little bit more. I feel like that's a potential change I might like to see, but also like if Ridley Gregg just comes back next game and you get him back on that second line there, then it's probably looking like a pretty good setup overall.
Yeah, for sure. I think while a lot of the power play sort of, papers over some of the things that were going on in this game for the Senators because it was very strong and they capitalized, made LA pay, credit to them. I still haven't entirely loved the game from the top 2 lines at 5v5.
Yeah.
So far, again, we'll see another couple weeks or so if they're able to step up. Giroux and Kachuk both new dads, so I think they're sort of learning to deal with that, and it may be affecting parts of their game. I'm not a dad personally, I can't really speak to that, but I see other people suggest it could be a thing. Um, but I wouldn't be opposed to sort of a reshuffling, at least in that top six, even if you don't, even if you want to keep that shutdown trio together. It's obviously more ideal when Ridley Gregg is here and you don't have to play Noah Gregor in such a high profile spot. But I definitely wouldn't be opposed to, trying. I always feel like Josh Norris's best games are with Brady Tkachuk, especially a couple of years ago when he scored 35 goals. That's who he played with. So I think I wouldn't mind seeing maybe even a reuniting of that line of the Norris, Batherson, Kachuk line, because I think Stützle and Giroux are both good enough. Stützle especially is good enough at this point to probably make it work with anybody. And you see if there's something there with Ridley Gregg riding shotgun on that wing when he's healthy, or some other combination. But I think at least trying to get more out of Norris and Batherson at 5v5 is definitely something they're going to have to consider here if the first three games are anything to go off of.
Yeah, I like that idea. Like we know that Norris and Kachuk are best friends, so putting them on the same line could help them elevate each other's games. And yeah, I've really liked Batherson in the first few games here too. So that trio coming back together, I feel like could be a good idea. And you mentioned it as well with Stützle and Giroux potentially carrying like a lesser player on the left wing there. One of our best lines last year at a certain point was Stützle, Giroux, and Joseph on that left wing. So I do wonder if that might be something that we see again with either like Ridley Gregg or Perron or anyone, or maybe even just still Noah Gregor in that spot too. Who knows? Um,
They
but yeah.
just did announce, Travis Green just did say, I, by the way, just saw it
Mhm.
in his post game. So Ridley Gregg's going to be at 1 to 2 weeks. So
Okay.
it looks like
So
Noah Gregor's there to stay, at least in that
yeah.
spot for the next little bit.
All
But
right.
yeah, but that's something to look forward to at least down the line. 1 to 2 weeks isn't too long. So hopefully Ridley Gregg is okay.
Yeah, so probably a few more games without him then. I think personally I'd like to see it shuffled around a bit so that Gregor isn't on the second line, but you know, nitpicking the forward lines in a game where we scored 8 goals, I am starting to feel a little silly about it at this point. But I mean, you're right that in terms of the 5-on-5, like half of our goals were on the power play, right? Like I think it was probably 4 power play goals in the end. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean we have to shout out Josh Norris too with the seventh and eighth goals in this game, getting the game-winning goal. It's great to see him back at full health. We haven't really seen him load up that one-timer too much on the power play in the last 2 games, but he scored in other ways. He scored 5 hole in overtime, and the other power play goal was off a wrist shot, which was nice to see him changing it up a little bit. Like maybe defenses and goalies just know that that big one timer is coming, so now he's got to try something different, and it worked tonight.
Yeah, I think he tried to get it off a couple of times and just like couldn't pull the trigger on in the first couple of games, but I did like how he sort of got into that inside area both on both goals that he scored. The one thing I'll say on Josh Norris that I've liked in the first couple games that I've been noticing from Travis Green, it feels crazy to talk about it now because it was over 2 years ago, was the DeBrincat season under DJ Smith. And earlier on, before Norris hurt his shoulder for the first time, I was liking how DJ Smith at that time, coming off the 35 goal year and everything, all the excitement around Norris, and DJ Smith was using him on the penalty kill. He was using him on late game draws and things like that. And I'm noticing that Travis Green is doing something similar with Norris right now. So even though we're all really eager for the offense to start coming, and it was good to see him get rewarded today and come up with 2 goals, I do like that Norris is out there taking important face-offs throughout the game. I really like that he's out there penalty killing. And it's good to see that they're not holding him back, and there doesn't seem to be a super big concern about the shoulder. So hopefully that's just a sign of things to come because even if he can't get back to the 35 goal level, and it remains to be seen, if he can be a positive contributor in other ways, defensively especially, I think, that's gonna make him still a really, really useful player. Again, it's going to take quite a bit for him to get up to being an $8 million player again, because we're essentially rebuilding the asset here in Josh Norris. But if he can continue to contribute those other ways, it's going to be exciting.
I totally agree. I think Norris is an underrated two-way forward, so I like seeing the coaches use him in that way on the penalty kill and that too. And like you said, it's encouraging seeing him take face-offs and not necessarily having everyone so worried that they won't even put him on the face-offs, because we've seen him get injured on them multiple times now. So it is encouraging to say the least. But yeah, any other thoughts on the offense before we move into our final segment with the chat?
No, I think it'll be tough to expect 8 goals out of them every game, but I
Yeah.
think aside from the Montreal game, I've liked sort of the blend of forwards that are on this team this year. We haven't seen their full potential yet, both offensively and defensively, but I do think there is some really good blend in there, and especially now with you're seeing a bit more offense from the blue line from Sanderson and from Shabbat. I think overall it's a good mix. So I'm excited to see what comes of this group.
Me too. Me too. 8 goal performance. You can't not be excited about the offense after that. But yeah, before we take a look at the chat, just gonna have our final plug of the day, which is we want to shout out a couple of our other shows, specifically Game Over Calgary and Game Over Winnipeg, who have mostly all new teams, new hosts that we've really enjoyed having with us for this new season. So we'd love for you guys to check them out. And those two teams are actually doing pretty great. They're both undefeated so far. Both of them are 3-0. They both won again last night. The Flames with a big Battle of Alberta win. So we had the crossover stream between the Flames hosts and the Oilers hosts. Go check that out on the Game Over Edmonton channel if you want to see how that went. And yeah, the Jets also winning again to remain undefeated. So go check out the recap from last night there too, and subscribe to those channels to help support the new guys on the network. But yeah, into the final period here, which is overtime. Fitting that we had overtime today, but we are going to take a look at the chat and see what the viewers are saying. So I haven't really pulled any chat comments yet, but I did notice right away that Newbie Sports said, according to Travis Green, there's a chance that Linus Ullmark plays on Thursday. There's a chance he plays on Thursday. So thank God. I got so excited about reading that I stumbled over my words, but thank God we need Ullmark back in the net. Like I can't even express how much we need him back, eh?
Yeah, like I said, I almost didn't survive one non-Olmark game from this team. I think a lot of us almost didn't survive it. I don't think they're going to be 7 goals against bad every time they go to Forsberg or Sogard or whoever, but oh man, are they a different team when they do not get saves versus when they do. And we've already seen it in 3 games this year, how different this team can be. And really, thank God Steve Stais went out in June and got a good goaltender, because if we had to go through this entire process again this year with the same goalies, and if they decided to run it back, oh man,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't want to picture that world.
we would be 0-3 right now if that was the case, for sure.
100%.
Especially
100%.
with Ullmark stealing that first game. And I think that if Ullmark was in tonight, like the Sens probably first of all don't need to score 7 goals in regulation, so they probably don't try quite as hard on offense. But I feel like if Ullmark was in net, we could have won that game like 5-3 pretty easily, just the way that the Sens dominated 5-on-5. So yeah, the difference that he makes is being seen really quickly early this year. Um, Take a look at the chat again. Anything you've noticed in there that you wanted to respond to?
Yeah, I'm just looking here. Seems like there's a lot of Olmark related angst in the
Yeah,
chat here.
that makes sense.
It
Um,
makes sense. I think I expected that from today.
we do have a note from one of our Calgary coaches, Conrad, who says that Carter Yakimchuk just scored for the Hitmen today. So I love to see that. And hey,
Good stuff.
with those defense injuries on the right side already, with Zub going down, it kind of makes me wish that we kept Yakimchuk for the 9 games. Like after the home opener, I was like, okay. It's fine that they sent him down because that was probably the plan all along, even though he impressed so much. But then one guy gets injured, and I'm like, oh, I wish we had him for a little bit, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think well, there was the rumors sort of late on in camp that the Senators were considering making a claim for a defenseman,
Yeah,
just in case to get another body in. I think that's something they're almost definitely gonna have to consider now, because if they didn't, they made the decision to send Yakimchuk down, which I think was objectively, I think most fans see that that was probably the right decision for the long term, although it would have been really cool to see him get a couple of games. But, they were one injury away from being really exposed. Now we've got that one injury potentially to Artem Zub, very important defenseman, and it sort of remains to be seen what the plan is in this case, because in terms of Belleville, there's not really anybody that I'm dying to see get a run of games in the NHL here. Like maybe Max Gannett can get a couple, but even then you're sort of really hoping that he can play well. It's not exactly one that jumps out a lot of confidence in you. I'm hoping that they can do something. The one thing that I live in Toronto. I'm from Toronto originally, so I hear a lot of Leaf stuff. I'm friends with way too many Leafs fans. Apparently they've got 9 NHL D-men on the roster, and they're trying to move one. Timothy Liljegren is the one everybody's discussing. Maybe
That's
there's a
right.
fit there.
He's been scratched, I think, for every
Yeah.
game so far.
Yeah, it looks like he's like ninth on their depth chart now. So, there are players like that. He's just an example. There are players like that around the league. So they might have to go shopping if it's anything long term to Zub. Hoping that's not the case. But even with Artem Zub in the lineup every night, I'm still not thrilled about JBD or Hamannek being the go-to guys because I just think um, it feels to underscore that pairing, the third defense pairing, really hasn't clicked so much for me in these first 3 games. So I'd like to see them, whether it's make a waiver claim or make a minor trade. They've definitely got to get another blue liner into the organization here.
I totally agree. And even without the injuries, with that bottom pair, it's just like with Clevin, you want to have a steady veteran next to a rookie like that. So JBD doesn't really fit the bill. And then Hamonic, he's a veteran, but is he steady? Not really.
No.
It's sort of, he's a little bit past his prime, to say the least. So yeah, I totally agree about that. It probably, sending Yakimchuk down is probably the best for his development, but we definitely could have used him for a few games here for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, like, because I'm not sure, say Zub can't go and you put JBD back in. I'm not sure. Like, Gannett is like really the only right-handed guy that you can recall in the short term. Like, Mutton Paulo
Yeah,
got a
just
couple
those two
games
guys, pretty
for them
much.
last year. Philip Roos was in camp with them, like, but he's a left shot, so there's really not much there in my mind that you can really rely on. So it definitely looks like if they need to make a fix, it's going to have to come from outside of the organization.
For sure. I'm thinking the fact that they didn't pick up anyone on waivers right before the season started. I wonder if they're wondering about looking for someone now. Maybe someone who's passed through waivers that you can then acquire them for a draft pick, and then since they've already passed through, you can send them down in the next 30 days or so if needed. I wonder if something like that might be a solution.
Yeah, I'd have to pull up a list of all the guys that have been on waivers in the past couple of weeks to make some kind of a determination to who I'd like to see personally. But like I said, just the lack of depth in that position, I think, is already on display, and we're not even a week into the season.
Definitely. And couple more chat comments. Armonia said that McEwen Clapper looked like it was 2007. Back at the beginning of the show, we were saying those 2007 throwbacks. It's funny. I feel like you never see slap shots off the rush anymore, much less a slap shot just like right from the blue line, like one timer basically. Uh, that was hilarious. I love seeing big slappers like that, and it was very out of the ordinary. McEwen seems to have a sneaky good shot. It's just that you don't really see him in those shooting positions too often. And hell, that wasn't even really a shooting position. He just decided to clap the shit out of it, and it worked. So that
Yeah,
was
I gotta
awesome.
find it. I think there was a stat that came out from last year, and he scored a slap shot goal last year against Philly.
Oh, I remember
And
that
I
one. Yeah.
believe I read this the other day that it was the hardest shot recorded last year
Yo,
was
that's
that shot.
crazy. I didn't know that.
So I think we're seeing a little bit of a trend. Zach McEwen likes to wind up for that slap shot. It's sneaky good. It's a dying art, really, the slap shot. So I'll try and find it for after, and maybe we can repost it or something. But I think yeah, he's got a sneaky good one.
Yeah, I actually, now that you mention it, I remember that goal. I think it was glove side off the rush
Hmm.
against the Flyers last year. That was the hardest shot. That's crazy. Maybe we should get him on power play too on that left side. Just crank some one timers. Maybe there's a hidden talent here that we didn't really know about.
Yeah, it seems like it. I again he like you pointed out earlier, he only played like 5 minutes tonight. despite the wonderful performance tonight, I probably don't need to see more than 5 minutes of Zach McEwen every night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I prefer the nice surprises like this where he can pop up with a really strong game. But credit to him, he was awesome tonight.
For sure. And one more question from the chat. Newbie is asking, who do you think scores the most goals for the Sens this season? And halfway through this game, it seemed like the obvious answer was going to be Stutzla, but now we got a lot of people scoring goals, eh?
Yeah, I'd still think Kachuk's gonna throw himself into the conversation, but yeah, I think Stutzla's a reasonably safe bet. Although I'd like to see Josh Norris step up and be the big goal scorer on this team again. Hopefully, there's more to come from tonight.
Yeah, I think Josh Norris is the one that everyone would love to see be the top goal scorer this year, just because then you know that unless things go horrible, that means that he probably scores like at least 30. So, and like I would say Kachuk is pretty much a lock for 30, and I think Stutzla is definitely going to get back to 30, barring health, because of course the whole reason that he didn't score so many goals last year was a wrist injury. So I think it's going to be a tough competition between the three of them if they all stay healthy. It is a little funny that we don't have a goal from Brady Kachuk yet, but I thought he played well tonight too. He had that drive to the net that was close to being a goal. But you know that he's going to start scoring soon.
Yeah, it's going to come at some point from him. I think like people keep pointing out, he's like a new dad. He's got things happening off the ice for him. So and the on ice body of work hasn't really been bad. I know some people and other fan bases were a little critical of him after some of his body language, mocking Lane Hudson on Saturday against
That was
the
just funny. I
Th-
like
that
that.
was that was ridiculous. I watched the game with a few friends, and I referred to Lane Hudson as a head fake merchant before that because he does quite a bit of that. So I found that pretty funny that Brady Tkachuk also caught on to the same thing. Yeah, I have no problem with Brady Tkachuk showing anything like that or there's a lot of things to be concerned about with the Senators this year. There's been a lot of things to be concerned about the last 5 years. Brady Tkachuk is very, very far down the list.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that moment up actually because like there was some takes on Twitter where people were like, "Oh, this is a bad look from your captain because it means he's getting phased and he's rattled and he's angry." And it's like, "No, you clearly do not watch Brady Tkachuk on a regular basis because that is not Brady Tkachuk being angry. That is Brady Tkachuk being a silly goof." And just having fun with it. Like, obviously, I'm sure he was annoyed that they were down in the game, but a little quick mocking of the opponent isn't like some huge, like, lose your cool moment or showing like bad leadership or anything. I thought it was really funny. The fact that he was able to like remain a little bit lighthearted in a game that they were losing to early in the year. You don't want to see frustrations boiling over so quickly. I think people misinterpreted that as being sort of something with him being fed up, but I think he was just being a goof like usual.
Yeah, it's a rival team, rival player that was getting all kinds of hype that game, all kinds of hype the couple of games before it. And I think, Brady Tkachuk was just playing mind games or just being a goof. Like it's some combination of the both. So I had it's the furthest thing that I have a problem with going on with the Senators.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot more important things to worry about than stuff like that. We know that Brady is just going to be a great scorer and great leader for this team, regardless this season. But yeah, I think that's probably where we'll leave it today. How do you feel about your first Game Over show?
Yeah, it feels good. I don't think all the games are going to be quite this good to cover throughout the year, but definitely a good start.
Yeah, awesome one to talk about here today. Almost too much to talk about. We were almost at like an hour on the episode, and I'm like, okay, did we touch on everything? Like maybe not, because there was so much that happened. But I think that'll do it for this one. Like and subscribe if you are not subscribed already. Share this around to your friends if you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Nick on Twitter. And yeah, thank you everyone so much for watching or listening. Happy Thanksgiving and have a good night.